Lee Anderson has been on a journey that would make Phileas Fogg look like a homebod. Born in Nottinghamshire, in his youth he was a member of Arthur Scargill's National Union of Mine Workers, and in 1983 he campaigned for the Labour Party under Michael Foot, the most left-wing Labour leader in a generation. Lee Anderson cites Scargill and old-school socialists like Dennis Skinner and Tony Benn as major influences in his early political beliefs. Lee Anderson worked as a coal miner for 10 years, just like his father, after which he served his community at the Citizens Advice Bureau and latterly in hospitals and hostels, supporting the homeless who had left care. A lifelong member of the party, he was elected as a Labour councillor in 2015 in Ashfield. But in 2018, he defected to the Tories in response to Labour's position on Brexit and what he called the takeover of the party by the hard left. Hardly a controversial view, given that the Momentum-backed Jeremy Corbyn was their leader. He was elected a Conservative councillor in Mansfield in 2019, and the rest is history. And now, his career with the Conservatives looks to be history too, after a poorly judged set of remarks about the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Speaking on this very channel, Lee Anderson, who is a good friend of mine and remains so, said that Islamists had Mayor Khan in their pocket. He said, "I don't actually believe that these Islamists have got control of our country, but what I do believe is that they've got control of Khan, they've got control of London. He's actually given our capital city away to his mates." Now, I think it was deeply wrong to label Khan in this way. Lee Anderson was given the opportunity to apologise, and if he had done, he would have remained a Conservative Member of Parliament. It's unfortunate that he has not apologised. What's not unfortunate is that he has rightly sparked a debate about the very real threat of Islamism or Islamic extremism to our democracy, to the rule of law, and to the British way of life. It's misleading for Sir Keir Starmer to label Lee Anderson's remarks as racist or xenophobic or even Islamophobic. Anderson is calling out extremism, people on the so-called peace marches chanting anti-Semitic slogans, and just this week projecting anti-Jewish hate speech onto Big Ben, as glaring an assault on our values as you can imagine, short of blowing the whole building up. Now, I've had people on the show saying from the river to the sea is not anti-Semitic. Well, the words by definition imply the disappearance of Israel from the map. And many say that the words imply genocide. Sounds pretty anti-Semitic to me. I've done a few gigs at bar mitzvahs and Jewish weddings, and let me assure you, from the river to the sea would not be my opening line. Now, the vast majority of British Muslims are our friends, our neighbours and our relatives. They're watching the show tonight. Fellow Brits, they make a huge contribution to this country and are peace-loving. But to vilify Lee Anderson for voicing concerns about dangerous extremists is to ignore a deeply sinister and growing problem in our country, and one which, as we saw in Parliament this week, strikes at the very heart of our democracy. After all, it was the leader of the opposition himself, Sir Keir Starmer, who pressurised the Common Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, into accepting a Labour amendment which meant that Labour MPs did not have to vote on an immediate ceasefire. He made it clear to Lindsay Hoyle that if Labour MPs had not supported an immediate ceasefire, they would have faced threats of violence and possibly even murder when they left the chamber. Is that not worthy of comment on the part of Lee Anderson or any other Member of Parliament? Starmer is rightly worried about Islamic extremism. So, is he Islamophobic too? Do Mayor Khan and the Met Police not have a case to answer for the amount of anti-Jewish rhetoric displayed at those pro-Palestinian marches? I think the political commentator and author Douglas Murray put it very well on Twitter this weekend when he said, "It's become a great tradition in UK public life to not confront Islamic extremism. Instead, each time there's an attack or threat, we sacrifice someone who said something about the threat. I see this season that Lee Anderson is the votive offering. Brilliant. That'll solve everything," he said. Here is the lesson of the story. Lee Anderson has now gone, but the problem facing our country remains. Has Lee Anderson been hung out to dry? Let me know your thoughts. I'd especially like to hear from you if you don't agree with what I've just said. Mark at gbnews.com. But first, my top pundits. Broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Linda, your reaction to the suspension of the whip on the part of Lee Anderson?
It was inevitable that the whip had to be withdrawn. He certainly overstepped a line. In fact, I've had a conversation with him about that several weeks ago, where he said you did indeed have to be very careful about that line, but on this occasion he seemed to be shooting from the lip. At the end of the day, he should have thought more carefully about what he was saying. And I'm talking about this in the capacity as a communications advisor. He should have got his hand on the edit button to try and work out exactly what he was going to say. Now, I agree with Henry Hill, the deputy editor of Conservative Home, who was on this channel earlier on today, who said that most of what he said was OK, and it supports what you're saying, Mark, but the bit about Mayor Khan could in fact be actionable. It could be slander. Because remember, the only defence to that in law would be the one of fair comment. And you actually have to prove with hard evidence the truth that underpins the fair comment. And that, I'm not sure that we've got that. Now, the situation is complicated with Lee Anderson, who I know appeals to many people, and I'm a great admirer of his background and how far he's come. But I think we all have to understand that he cannot. It's been said that the whip has been removed temporarily, perhaps, and that he will have to apologise if indeed he's going to be taken back into the fold. But the problem is, it's not a problem actually, but my observation is that I don't think that Lee Anderson will apologise. It's got nothing to do with being intransigent. He does not believe he has said anything to be sorry about. So he isn't going to apologise. The question is, what does he do next? That is interesting. But the other part of my observation is that I don't believe that London is in the grip of extremism. So I don't agree with you. I don't think that's happening. I'd like to see more evidence than just people protesting at the weekend. I would have to be really convinced to think that our capital city is actually in the grip of extremism.
Well, Linda Jubilee, it's just the words and the concerns of the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, who begged Lindsay Hoyle to accept that Labour amendment, because if Labour MPs did not back and vote for an immediate ceasefire, they would face violence when leaving the House of Commons, potential murder. That sounds pretty extreme to me.
Yeah, but it's also subjective and it's an observation, and we don't know what went on in the room with Sir Lindsay Hoyle. We don't know exactly what the conversation was because there were only two of them in the room. They even ejected the clerk, who is the person who understands the legal process inside the chamber. He wasn't in the room with them.
No, well, indeed so, although I understand that this decision to accept the Labour amendment went against the advice of the House of Commons clerks working under the Speaker. But listen, let me get your thoughts on this, Neil Hamilton, your reaction to this whole story.
Well, I'm rather underwhelmed by it in a way, because all that Lee pointed out was the reality of what's happening in this country, and in particular in London. Of course, this is all part of the Tories' grand electoral strategy to try to alienate every possible grassroots Tory voter before the election comes. So they'll have a complete clean sweep, and they're doing very well at that at the minute. And I think they were on 21% in the latest opinion poll, which is far, far worse than John Major in 1997. What we've got running the Tory party today is a collection of social democrats and wet centrist liberals who have nothing in common whatsoever with ordinary people whom Lee Anderson represents and speaks for. You know, London has changed. 36% of the people in London identified themselves as white British in the 2021 census. 36% in our capital city. There are now 4 million Muslims in this country, whereas 20 years ago there were only 1.5 million. And by the 2050, it's projected that we shall have 13 million Muslims in this country. Now, that's going to make a great difference to the way our political system works, because in the 2019 general election, 72% of Muslims voted Labour. So, of course, they've got a stranglehold on the Labour Party, and sectarian politics has arrived in Britain big time. What we used to associate only with Northern Ireland is now increasingly going to affect, in particular, our big cities, in which the Labour Party is overwhelmingly preponderant. And so they're going to, in effect, have a stranglehold on the Labour Party. This is inevitable with the figures as they are developing. Now, if we ignore this, we ignore it at our peril. And what we see on the streets in London with these pro-Palestine marches is just a symptom of the problem and is a foretaste of what is to come.
However, Neil, your concerns, your projections about a growing number of British Muslims in the population, is that not Islamophobic?
No, I'm just saying 72% of them voted Labour in 2019, and therefore people who are Muslim activists in the Labour Party are going to become more preponderant within it. And that means who is driving these pro-Palestinian marches? The average member of the British public is not as exercised about this issue as the activists.
Neil, you're completely wrong. The average member of the British public is not just exercised, but horrified by what is going on in Gaza. And before we just...
Well, I don't know what you're basing that on.
Extend this, the number of children and women that are being slaughtered, the number of people who have died, innocent people, innocent victims.
Well, blame Hamas, not Israel.
You can blame who you like, but the point
it's a terrorist state which attacked Israel and slaughtered 1,500 people on 7th of October. Be that
as it may, innocent women and children are dying, and we are seeing it on our televisions every night, and it's horrifying. It's very hard.
Why doesn't Hamas surrender and hand over the hostages?
It's very hard to get through a news bulletin on Gaza when you see young children maimed or crying.
But Nina, we can all agree, but does that justify violent, murderous threats on Labour MPs if they don't back a ceasefire, which is the reason why the vote was cancelled?
No, that's not it. Look, I have no truck with religion of any kind, whether it's Catholic, Jewish, Mormon, or Islam. I think religion is the root of all of our problems when it comes down to it. So I am not for any side, and I want to distinguish between the Jewish people, the Israeli state, and Netanyahu, because those are all very, very different things. But I want to say that London is not in the grip of Islamist extremism. This is inflammatory, it's divisive, and it's the sort of rhetoric that we should not hear. And those marches, as far as I can tell, apart there are extremists in any organisation or any group of people, there will be an extremist. But the majority are marching just for peace. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. That's what they're saying.
OK, no problem. But there's no extremism, Islamic extremism in Britain, except in the area around Westminster, according to Sir Keir Starmer. But